My parents separated when I was probably 3 years old. My dad raised me in this little cabin. We had no power. We had an outhouse. I stayed in this single wide trailer that had lots of rats and fleas. During those kind of hard times, you realize things. I never wanted to be hungry. I never wanted to be poor. So I left home, as soon as I possibly could.
Welcome to the Masters of Business podcast with Daniel Beer.
Hey guys, we have a treat for you today. This is Ben Kinney on today. And if you don't know Ben, I always love the surprise face that Ben gives. So if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see the hello face, I call it, that he always gives us. But if you're in for a treat, this is somebody who's built a business that has an over $1 billion valuation from the humble beginnings of, some would think from the humble beginnings of just being a realtor, though the reality is there's far humbler beginnings well before that, including in, personally and professionally, going in cable guy days, and we'll go over there. But Ben, welcome to the show, man. Everybody appreciates you being here. This is Masters of Business, so it goes well. These are insights for just any small business person who wants to think bigger, be more, operationalize, and we dig in with people who have an absolute proven track record. You have a number of businesses that have just done really amazing things. Of course, your current focus is Place, and I'd love for you to explain exactly what Place is, what it does, and also you have tech companies that are part of the entire Place ecosystem. So why don't you tell us what Place is, what you're doing for the real estate industry through Place, but then also we'll dig in a little bit further into the man behind it all, and we'll get into stuff that I think is just really, really interesting. So welcome to the show, man.
Matt, thanks for having me. Super excited to spend some more time with a friend of mine. So, you talked about the successful businesses that we've launched, but we could do a whole other show on all the unsuccessful businesses that I launched and they actually failed that nobody's ever heard of. So I think that's part of the journey of all of us. Is some things you win and some things you don't. But Place turns out to be pretty good winner. Goldman Sachs invested $100 million into our company in 2021, which gave us an over $1 billion valuation, which was a crazy thing to think about, which actually means nothing at all, except for now I have a boss that owns 8% of my company and I can no longer distribute profits to myself. So there's pros and cons to these numbers that people throw out there, but Place is doing something cool. We started off with this idea that we were going to provide everything that real estate professionals need to run their business all in one place: software, accounting, bookkeeping, payroll, legal, HR, digital advertising, marketing, helping them find agents, train agents, hire staff, like literally anything you need to run your business, all the way down to the swag and the business cards and the embroidery machines, like you should be able to get from partnering with Place. And as we started down that journey, Dan, I realized that there was a bigger opportunity, not just for me, but for these people at Place that I call my business partners, is to provide everything the homeowner needs for their home all in one place. Like, how do you wake up one day and the customer opens the Place app, and inside the Place app, they check their mortgage statement and they talk to their agent and they order repairs and they check their insurance prices. Like anything they need for their home, they should be able to get from one place through one app. And we are hoping that Place will be that for homeowners in America.
I think a lot of people know you're trying to impact the real estate industry, but to the point you're making right now is you are trying to leave your fingerprint, and you don't see this as the Ben Kinney fingerprint, but you and your team, your staff, your executive group, you've assembled quite the group. You're trying to leave your fingerprint really on the fabric of American home ownership, period. And that's not some cheesy cliche that we're putting together here. It's literally what you're driving at, and it's already underway. Though, let's face it, there's probably other groups in other places elsewhere, some of them have had funding, that have said the same thing. I want to leave my fingerprint on American home ownership. Why is it that Place really is positioned to be able to do it? Why did Goldman Sachs see that you really could do it and put their money where their mouth? What is it that drives that? Because I think a lot of people listening, they want to build their businesses bigger. They want to, they have visions of an exit, or they have visions of building something that hasn't been done. And then there's only a handful that get to where it appears you're going right now. And when it comes to your industry, you're already where very few have gone already. So what do you think it is that actually puts you in a position or enabled place to get to where it is with a real probability of making that ultimate impact versus those that aspire to the same, but it just doesn't get there? Because the goal seems to be the same. So there has to be a difference somewhere else.
Yeah, I think part of it's the approach and what we care about. But when you look through the last 5 years of really successful companies that raised a lot of money, that maybe went public or are still trying to go public, you saw companies that raised $1 billion or billions of dollars. And at the end of the day, what they were doing, Dan, is they were paying $10,000 to acquire $2,000 worth of revenue. And that math doesn't work. Their cost of acquisition was just out of whack. You can't build a business, doing that. Second is most people in the real estate space were trying to go around the real estate agent. And what they don't realize is that when any of us have a question about our home, we call the person we know and trust the most, probably the person that helped us purchase that home in the first place. Now, I'm a real estate professional at heart, and I bought a second home in Arizona. And you get into that house and all of a sudden things start breaking. And because that's what happens with houses. What do you do? Like back in the day, you'd open the phone book and you like scroll through to plumber or electrician. You try to find somebody to come out to your house. You go Google random things in your barrage with a bunch of like paid ads to like syndicators that send it off to people you don't know. I'm like, no, I call the agent that helped me buy that house, Travis, and say, Travis, help me find somebody to fix the roof. And he does. So I think there's all these companies that have tried to go around the agent instead of partner with the agent. And Place's approach is, how do we go to the real estate agent and give them the tools so that they can offer all these services to the 1,000 people that they already know that trust them, and help them make home ownership more affordable and more approachable and actually easier.
So let's take this back here to, you have this big idea, it has legs, you're gaining traction. You start to think like we realistically could go raise Wall Street money. We think we could, at least. What would that look like? I think that a lot of business people that start having these thoughts, it's so murky, so gray. Like, what is even the first step? That's already where they lose. That's already where they stop, because it just seems overly complicated. So just going down, like speaking to the business owner that thinks that has a great business, it seems to be scaling, it's growing, and they might be able to turn it into something far bigger than they ever thought. Like how'd you even figure out what first step to take, right? Like it's you might have been amazing at all the things you'd ever been amazing at, but you'd never done that. So you were an absolute rookie day one of trying to go raise capital. Or at least to that magnitude, Wall Street money. You might have raised money in other areas, but I imagine it wasn't Wall Street money from Goldman Sachs. So how'd you figure out step one? Like, what was the process for you that somebody else might use as a blueprint?
Everybody listening to this podcast that's had a level of success can relate to this statement. I wake up every single day running the biggest business I've ever ran, solving problems that I've never tried to solve, right? And dealing with issues I've never seen before. So none of us really know. But how did I raise money at that level? Well, my first company 12 years ago, I started building software for a company called Blosser. And that one, I wasted nearly $1 million and I had to shut it down and didn't survive. And then the second company, which you're familiar with, is a software company for real estate agents called Brevity. And Brevity had a little bit of success. I was the only sales rep and I had one software developer. We brought in $500,000 in revenue that first year. And then I hired a sales rep and a marketing person and one more software person, developer, and we got to $1.6 million. And then we got to $3 million. And we just kept growing. But every time I got more revenue, Dan, I needed another support person. And I needed a billing person. And I needed an extra sales rep. And I needed an extra marketing person. And I was building and building and building, but I felt like I was never getting ahead. So I went off early on in that journey to try to raise money to build this tech company called Brevity. And I probably have in my email box today that I could dig up 40 rejection letters. Brevity will never be big. We don't see this as an opportunity. Call us back when you double your revenue. Your growth is too slow. Your churn is too high. Like rejection after rejection after rejection. They said, once you're doing 5 million in revenue, call us. And I did. And they're like, well, maybe at 10 million and then at 20 million. And I struggled raising money. And what I realized was I was like 80% there to the right idea. And sometimes we get so caught up that our concept has to work that we aren't open to the evolution of it being something different. What I think about when I think about the place evolution is a little bit of like what happened in COVID. I was at home. Washington State shut down pretty hard, and I was at home. I was watching TV. There's this handsome man on TV in bike shorts, and he was pedaling on a Peloton. And I'm like, I need one of those. I'll be skinny and tall and tan like him. And I buy the Peloton. It goes to my house. I jump on there. I ride it, and it hurts me in spots that I've never known I could hurt on my body before, Dan. It was an uncomfortable experience.
Yeah, don't do that.
And then when I got off that bike, I said, I don't just need a Peloton. I need a workout buddy. I need supplements. I need to hydrate water better. I need to eat better. I need to go to the doctor. I need to get some blood work done. There was like 10 different things that if I did, I would be healthier and I would be happier. Well, business is a lot like that. Software in itself doesn't solve a lot of our problems. Otherwise, every company that uses a piece of software would be successful as the other company that uses the same software, but that isn't the case. It's the combination of software plus other solutions. So what we did is we said, we have this good idea for Brevity that has traction, but what would happen if we bundled our software with other services? Would that affect churn? Well, it did. Churn went to almost zero. Nobody ever left when we bundled those services. Would that change our average customer value? Our average customer value went from $500 a month to $100,000 a month. Like the customer value like completely changed. And I looked up and I said, oh, I have something that somebody would want to invest in. I have something here. Like, and if I would have stayed stuck, Dan, in that process, I would have never been able to take our company to the next level. Now, there's lots of reasons to raise money. And if I would have raised money earlier on, if I would have been more successful, I would have been diluted and I would have owned a fraction of our company. Now we only sold 8% of the company to Goldman and 2% to two other investors. So we still control 90% of the company. But if I would have been successful in raising capital, maybe we would only own 30% or 40%. So it's funny how rejection actually...
You were successful at being unsuccessful, huh?
That's
Do
right.
you think a lot of people do that, Ben? You're exposed to so many different businesses now, and do you think that most people raise money too early?
I think a lot of people go through that journey, and I think it creates a bunch of businesses that buy really expensive office space and buy $1,000 desk and spend millions of dollars on the decor in their office. Like if you come into Place, which is a $1 billion plus company, you'll see that the furniture I bought used from the other people, when they moved out of the space.
Yeah.
Which is a kind of a weird thing for a company of our size. But when you bootstrap a company and you use your own money for everything, you treat capital in a different way. When you borrowed money and it's other people's money and there's no consequence to you using it, and your investors say you could always borrow more and get more, you don't treat it with the same sincerity or concern that you would with your own money. And I've always treated capital, whether it's mine or investors, as if I lost it, I'd have to pay it back.
I see a parallel there to, in the real estate space where I'm from, a lot of people, there's all these conferences now, all these seminars, and even all these podcasts, right? And so people start doing what may or may not have been meant for them, except for it's what's being talked about on stage. So they start growing maybe a team, or they open up their own independent brokerage. And some of them aren't necessarily ready for that, but it's cool. And so it could very well be that in the tech world, in the, world that you're playing in, a lot of people, it's cool to raise money. It's cool to say you got a round of, XYZ valuation. And so they're probably there a little bit too early. You being able to do what you did, you have this, and feel free to explain it if you like. I know you have this mindset of doubling, your doubling mindset. And how much did that play into being able to go from where you are to where you were to where you are? And even before you answer that, I'm going to share a really cool little story that plays into that, because your ability to grow something, believe in it, and to have this massive vision. It's like, guys, I was riding in Ben's truck in 2017, and it's just a really cool thing. It's like it's just awesome. I was riding in his truck in 2017. I'm in Bellingham, Washington, and I went to go spend a couple days with Ben. He was just giving me advice. He's always been just amazing, right? Anybody that's ever had the opportunity to learn from him, and by anybody, I mean the tens of thousands of us that have had the opportunity to learn from him, just know that is true. He's just awesome. But in any case, we get into this conversation, and I think it's okay for me to say this now because this is 2017 at the time, and I can't remember if he said if the offer came or if he already had one. I don't know. I think it was like if he could get one. He said, "Gosh, I don't think I'd sell Brevity for even $30-40 million or something like that." I think we were just talking about like, would you sell it for something? He said, "No, I don't think I would, not even for about this much." And when he said that, my jaw dropped. I'm like, what on earth is this freaking lunatic talking about, man? Maybe I shouldn't have flown out to Bellingham and gotten advice from him. He's crazy, And so you look up now, and that 30 or 40 million he wouldn't have taken has an over $1 billion valuation. And that's just a crazy story about a big, big vision. I'll loop to that in a moment. But to get there, from there to where you are, just all this, everything we just discussed, this back to your doubling mindset. How much of that plays into it? Is that something that you were conscious of along the way? And feel free to explain what that was. Or is it something that looking back on, you maybe think, hey, that's maybe how I did it?
Yeah, I did get an offer for 30-something million to sell Brevity before you and I met. And then I got an offer a couple years later for 230 million for Brevity, and I didn't take it. But what's funny is somebody asked me once at kind of one of these events, Dan, they said, "Why'd you never sell Brevity?" And I looked him in the eye and I thought for a second, and I said, well, here's the real honest answer. Nobody ever called me on the right day. Because there was lots of days when I was trying to make payroll, when I was pulling money out of stock accounts or retirement accounts or equity in my properties just to make payroll, that I would have dumped it for a heck of a lot less. Nobody ever called me on the right day, which I think is good for business owners to know that, when they're looking for opportunities or acquisitions, sometimes you just got to be lucky and you got to call somebody on the right day. But for me, nobody ever called me on the right day. Elon Musk is this guy that dreams about going to Mars. He wants people to live on Mars. I've never been that human, which brings us back to Dan's question of the doubling mindset. I have a belief that if I can make $10,000, there's a really good chance that I can make $20,000. If I made $100,000, I believe that I can make $200,000. If I bought one property, I know I could buy two. If I own 10, I know I can own 20. If the company's worth $100 million, I know I can get it to $200 million. It's really easy in my mind to know that I can double something, because I don't believe that most of us work at even a fraction of our potential. Most likely, we're all working at under 70%, if not 60% or 50% our overall potential. You're leaving a lot of potential on the table. And if that's the case, why can't you do better than you've always done? And that's my doubling mindset. Not knowing that you can go to Mars. I have a hard time fathoming and understanding and building a plan for that, but I can always build a plan to double where I'm at today.
So I hear you saying that you don't connect so much with the, we're going to 10X this, 10X, 10X, 10X. You don't connect with that as much, is what I'm hearing.
Correct. Unless you can draw a line from here to there and show me a path on how we're going to do it, I just have no energy to waste dreaming about things. If you can put a plan for it, and I believe the plan, I'm in. But if you don't have a plan, I'm not going to get excited about it. It's a waste of energy.
I mean, guys, it's just a lot of, you'd want to rewind that, like listen to that again, because he has 10X'd and actually 20'd, and I don't know, I'd have to go do the math on how many more. But just like most of us, it's just so much easier to imagine that you can go from, like he said, 100,000 to 200,000, from 1 million to 2 million. And you can do that too. Like it really, I wrote down what you said because I'm going to take it into my sales meeting with my team, Ben, which is we don't work at a fraction of our potential. Who here agrees that they have more potential? Okay, great. Then why wouldn't you be able to sell double what you're selling, et cetera? And everybody will have that buy-in. And then also nobody ever called you on the right day. Man, I know there's only a few thousand salespeople listening in right now. I'm not even going to try to decide. I'm not going to try to even interpret that one or unpack it for you. You already know what it means. Nobody called them on the right day. And how's your sales process? How fast do you quit? How many no's do you give up on? And so that's huge. Really, really, really good. So, and I don't know if I interrupted you wherever you were headed, Ben.
No.
So we don't work at a fraction of our potential. So, as I'm hearing you say all that, and I hope you don't mind, I just need to ask you, like, going back to relatively humble beginnings. How is it, because I think a lot of people right now can be listening, like, oh, I put $1 million into this company, it didn't work, blosser, and so, oh, this is some rich guy. No. So give us a sense of where you come from. Like, I'd love to go back to childhood. I'd like to go back to, like, how is somebody that can think as big as you, and I know the background here, but just to whatever extent you want to share where you're coming from. And then how on earth does that kid end up being this man right here?
Yeah, thanks for asking. My parents separated when I was probably 3 years old, and my mom took my sister and my dad took me. And my dad raised me in this little cabin. It was under 300 square feet. We had no power. We had an outhouse. We cooked on a wood stove. And then every other weekend, I went to a single wide trailer 40 miles away, and I stayed in this single wide trailer that had lots of rats and fleas and that kind of stuff with my mom and her alcoholic stepfather, or her alcoholic husband, my stepfather. I saw my first heroin overdose by the time I think I was 7 at a pizza restaurant from one of our family members. I saw lots of drugs growing up. And I also saw lots of hunger. I remember, just kind of waiting on food from the food bank, Dan, growing up and being hungry. But I also had a dad that made me say please and thank you and look him in the eye when I needed something, and hold the door for people. And he would smack me in the back of the head if I wasn't polite or wasn't home on time. Like, he ran a tight ship. My mom, who was pretty severely addicted to drugs and alcohol, also worked all day as a janitor at the local high school and a waitress at night. Like, she had the work ethic of as strong as anybody I've ever met, Dan. So, from humble beginnings, I learned to be kind and polite and good from my father. And I learned my work ethic from my mom. And that's got me a long ways. But during those kind of hard times, you realize things. One thing I realized was I never wanted to be hungry. I never wanted to be poor. I never wanted to fight with my spouse or my partner about money, because that's all I remember hearing was my mom and her husbands fighting about money and the stress of money and not having money. I just didn't like that. And so I left home, as soon as I possibly could, and went off on my own and started working full time and paying my way through college. And one of my first jobs, actually, when I was in high school, was at GNC, the vitamin store.
Sure.
And I don't know if you know this, but the vitamin stores, GNC, at least when I worked there, they paid commission. And this is really, really important, because I was working for like $5.35 an hour, minimum wage. However, if I sold X amount of vitamins, I could get my hourly wage up to $10 or $12 or $15 or $20 an hour. That's when I realized, kind of early on in my career, is if I chose the right type of job, that my hourly rate could be in my control, not everybody else's. And really, from that point forward, I have always picked jobs and opportunities where I got to control what my hourly rate was.
So what lessons, and I'm going to circle back here, we're going to pick up right there, but what lessons about compensation have you brought with you? So do you have a framework that you use to think about, I'm gonna pay this executive or this salesperson, or even say an operations person? Are there any do, do you simply, okay, well, are you basic about it in that, well, what's the going rate for a person like this? So that's what I'm going to pay. Or is there any kind of different framework you use? Do you always believe in everyone needs upside, or it depends on the role? What compensation advice, lessons can you put out there for the audience? One belief system I have is that compensation has to incentivize the desired behavior and the desired result. It often doesn't, but we all struggle with trying to solve for that, myself included. So what would you say to that?
Yeah. It depends on where you're at in your career. Like at certain points when I was building my business, I had to go to people and say, I really want to work with you. I understand that I probably can't afford you, but is there something we could figure out at which you would be open to this opportunity? And what I found was there were lots of people out there that were willing to take a pay cut in order to be a part of something they believed in. As the companies have grown and we've evolved and we became, cash flow positive and businesses that had capital, my new philosophy for this stage of our business is probably pay people market value, never overpay people, just over reward people when they outperform everybody else. Now, understand the purpose of compensation is to drive a behavioral change. And if it doesn't drive a behavioral change, there's no reason to add more comp above what the market rate of that role is. But there might be something else that you can do that would drive behavioral change for that person. Some people want recognition. Some people want additional opportunities. I have a handful of people that would jump out of a window naked for an iPad, but they wouldn't do it for an extra $10,000 cash. They love prizes. Some people do it because I can whisper in their ear and say, hey, Dan, good job. You're number 2 right now. And there's nothing worse than telling a Dan he's number 2, right? Because he's driven to be number 1. So you got to figure out how are the people around you that you care about the most wired. And then you can use compensation as one of your tools, but it's not the only tool to get people to have behavioral change.
It's such a huge challenge, isn't it? That to get to where you can understand what will create that change, but that just would not resonate for you, that you just couldn't give a crap. I mean, something I struggle with is there are people that just need the pat on the back on a constant, regular basis. It's free, for God's sake. I'd rather pay them more money because I'm just not wired to do that on a constant basis because it wouldn't mean that much to me.
Yeah.
But it means the world to them. And that's really one of the biggest challenges in leadership is how many different personalities you have to cater to or provide for and be there for.
Have you met my assistant, Aaron, Dan?
I believe I have. I certainly did not get to know her. I only, it was a hello and a goodbye and a thank you.
Aaron basically farts rainbows. Like if she rode in on a horse, it would be a unicorn. Like everybody she touches feels better. Like the world is better. Like she just leaves you feeling amazing. She is the person around me that makes sure that everybody knows that I care about them because I'm wired like you. Some people say, well, that's just not me, so I don't need that in my organization. I said, I understand that other people need that. Who in my world could I bring to make sure that nobody ever feels unloved? And
so it requires self-awareness on your part. And then also even eventually just you being able to say, hey, I'm not going to be great at something. And that seems to be hard for a lot of people to say.
Yeah, I'm not wired to say, hey, good job for doing the thing that I just paid you a nice salary to do every single day. Like that's just inherently,
yeah,
it's just not me. But I do have to understand that people need that sometimes. And I get better and better at it as I get older and a little bit wiser.
I heard somebody, I don't remember where it was I heard this. I think it was Chris Voss. I was listening to, I was in person with Chris Voss at a little conference, little small room, 100 people. And he talked about, I think it was him. Anyway, he talked about treating your staff, your employees, as if they were volunteers. How would you treat them if they were volunteers? Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I agree with you. Just on the surface of it is, hold on, like you did exactly what we agreed to. But there's no doubt about it that most people would react tremendously well to that. I've always had I think the wrong belief, and it's affected even personal relationships, where if I say, gosh, thank you so much for making me this dinner, as an example, thank you so much for my dinner, that'll make it almost seem like making the dinner is something that I never would expect to have again. Like it was just a once in a blue moon treat, and unlikely to happen again. But probably wrong. Probably that would have created more dinners.
I
So
think if you went around my world, Dan, and you said, "Hey, how do you know that Ben loves you or cares about you?" You would get a lot of different answers. But somebody came into my world once, and their goal of their trip, like you did in 2017, was to figure out why people didn't leave my world. So they asked two different people that day, and the first person they asked, they said, "Hey, you bring in X amount of revenue. Why have you never left?" And the guy said, "I'd barely known Ben a year, and I messaged him the morning my dad died, and he went and picked me up, and we hiked for half the day. He was just there talking to me." The next guy said, "I failed my real estate exam 11 times, and Ben never gave up on me. He continued to pay for it. He continued to tell me that it was the right thing. And because of that, ... Like it's little tiny things. Like I may not give thank yous as much as I should, but you'll often find a book on your desk from me of something that I think that they would appreciate. You'll often get a couple of tickets to go somewhere to see a show or whatever that might. I just do little tiny things on how I like to show love, and they know it, I believe.
it's awesome. And the little things are the big things. Dude, I have to go back to you, this one also. You described your youth and what you grew up with, and then what you've overcome where you're at now. And it made me wonder, how do you react to excuses? Because I got my guess at it, but hey, who knows? Maybe you empathize. Maybe it's like, man, shut the F up. You don't know what I've been through, so get rid of that excuse. How do you react to excuses today?
I think that, one of the journeys that I've been on has been becoming more emotionally intelligent. And emotional intelligence is really divided into 5 areas. Self-awareness, knowing what you do every single day in a pro or con way that affects your life and your relationships. Self-regulation, your ability to regulate those behaviors and things that you do. Empathy, being empathetic to what other people are going through. Motivation, helping people find their internal motivation to do things. And then your social skills. And the better you get at those 5 things, the better you become at helping people. But when somebody has excuses or somebody has a struggle or a failure, you have a couple choices. One, you could just sit there and listen to them bitch and moan and complain about how bad their life is, or you could help them come up with a plan to get through it. I'm only willing to do the second. I will spend as much time as somebody needs to help them come up with a plan and work through an issue. I will spend 0 time listening to people complain and moan about what's going on in their life. Winners focus on things they can control. Losers focus on things they can't.
When you go back to your 8, 9, 10, 12, 15, was there somebody older, wiser in your life that helped you see through all that?
As a young child,
Yeah, to help you just see all that you could become. Was there a mentor?
I don't
Maybe it
think,
was as a teenager. Maybe it was, and maybe not. Maybe that person wasn't. Maybe not at all.
I was in speech therapy as a child because I stuttered all the time when I spoke, and I was pretty dyslexic even though I didn't know it. I write now, even the wrong letters come out in the wrong order when I write. So reading and writing were always somewhat of a struggle. I had horrible acne in high school, and there's just lots of things that made me shy and insecure. If I had to pick one person, I'd pick 2. One, I had a guidance counselor in high school that I really felt like believed in me. She ended up naming her son after me, actually, a young man named Ben now. And then I had a wrestling coach. And the wrestling coach, I remember when you're a freshman in wrestling, everything's hard. You're trying to do push-ups and they're hard. But when you're a senior, the wrestling coach would go around the room and say, if anybody goes down on their knees, we're starting over. So we're at 99, and us being seniors, we would drop to our knees, and he would yell, "Dang it, Kinney, we're starting over." But we didn't care because we wanted to, mess with the freshmen and the sophomores because they were easy for us. We had done it for so long. But one of the messages I remember Coach Farley saying to me was, if you don't work hard, you're only cheating yourself. That's the benefit of kind of wrestling. I think it's a one-on-one sport. It's not so much a team sport. They have some scoring, but it's one-on-one. So if you don't give 100%, like at the end of the day, at the end of your life, who are you really cheating? Well, you're cheating yourself. And I try to bring that message back to people today. Like, you don't have to live up to your potential. I'm going to. You don't have to. But if you don't, I just want you to know you're only cheating yourself. You're not cheating me. I'm going to be fine.
Man, I didn't know you were a wrestler. What weight?
148.
I wrestled 135, but only for
24.
one season. And
Fair
it's
enough.
my biggest regret because I think it was actually something I was most natural at over some other sports that I spent more time in.
Yeah.
But it was great. Just great. The training, the one-on-one, the combat, even the stuff that was probably not the best if we, looking back on it, like the weight cutting and all this stuff that went on. But man, that's discipline I just pray my kids will get. It was just awesome.
Yeah. It was good for me.
Awesome. So, all right, you have all these, you have a number of companies. They're kind of under one big umbrella now. But still, so many companies and divisions, and I can only imagine. Look, I get plenty that comes across my desk, people wanting to do this, that, or the other with me. So I can only imagine what comes across yours, probably just a magnitude of that. So something I really love to ask everybody that comes on this podcast is, is there a framework you use? Is there, how do you decipher between when you're looking at an opportunity worth pursuing versus a distraction? This is, I think, one of the biggest things that'll knock even somebody, on their path to greatness, and they'll just knock them right off the cliff and dead, is when they cannot decipher between opportunity and distraction.
Yeah, so good. One of my favorite quotes around that is, be careful of the undisciplined pursuit of more. More isn't always better. You can have 10 crappy businesses and all 10 of them will still add up to crap. And you can have one great one and 3 crappy ones, and it'll wipe out all the greatness of the first one. You have to be very thoughtful about anything you add is additive to your life, additive to your relationships, additive to your finances, right? Additive to your core business. You also have to ask yourself the question, if I really, really crushed it at this new opportunity, would it change my life? And as I realized over time, Dan, is a lot of things. I could be the best in the world at owning XYZ business, and it would still be a crappy business in comparison. I could win and not be a winner. So you got to be really thoughtful about what you do. But I also have another framework that I use. I think about, who do I have here? I have a Shohei Ohtani card in front of me.
Why am I not surprised?
No, right here. Killer player, by the way. A legend. Would go down one of the best ever in the world. When you're playing baseball, you could do a base hit, so you get to first base. You could do a double, right? You get to second base. You can do a triple, which is a pretty incredible hit, right? Or you could do a home run. I have a buddy that'll probably become a billionaire at some point, but he only swings for home runs. So far in his life, he's basically only struck out. But maybe at some point, if time allows and he swings enough times, he'll finally hit a home run. I don't like that. I don't like this feeling of stress, of pressure, of financial, I don't like that. It eats at me. And I have some other friends that only take base hits. They're only swinging for singles and doubles, and they're never going to have anything they're super proud of. So what I want is I want 80% of my time and energy in businesses to be singles and doubles that are going to bring me in enough wealth to buy houses and invest in the stock market and build long-term security and give back to my community and do that stuff. And I want 20% of my time and energy to be something that has the potential to be a triple or a home run. Now you get to define what that is based on where you're at in life right now. Your base hits might be a business that makes 50 grand a year or 100 grand a year. And your triples might be something that makes $250,000 a year, and a home run, might be $500,000. Or you might be listening to this and be like, my base hits are $1 million wins, but a triples would be 10 million and a home run would be 50 million or 100 million. Okay, you decide. But decide how much time you're willing to invest in each one of those. I've just decided that I'm not willing to risk all my wealth and all my time and energy for the potential to maybe have a home run. I'm going to make sure at the end of the day, I win, no matter what.
Love that. Love that. Love that. Really, really good. And, before you go, Ben, one of the things I find just most fascinating is you have this open calendar. You have this open calendar that, even though you've explained it to me, even though you've walked me through it, I'm going to have to hear it again, and I need everybody else to hear it too. You run all these different companies. You have to answer to Wall Street. You have a board of directors, I'm pretty sure. You must have more going on than just, I'm got a real estate business. Yet you keep I'd say, what is it? Maybe not 100% of your calendar, but is it fair to say 85% of your calendar over the course of the week, roughly, is just wide open? So let's have a discussion around time management, it's tied to this idea that you said earlier that most people aren't meeting their potential. Most people would agree on that, basically, probably based on how they use time. How can somebody like you, if I said, Ben, can you chat with me next Tuesday? And you said, sure, what time do you want? And I said, well, how about 1:00? You'd be like, yep, that works. Like, what are the odds of that? With most anybody else in a position like yours, we have to play calendar back and forth for 3 straight days until we finally find 15 minutes, but not you. What is it? Yeah. Everyone would like to have your, I think if you actually, a lot of people might say, well, gosh, I'd love to have all the businesses he has, but gosh, he must not have any time. It couldn't be more wrong. You were hunting today. So go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, I had a 9:30 appointment yesterday and a 10 a.m. appointment. Both were 30 minutes long. And then at 6:00, I took 10 of my employees to go see Gladiator 2. Like that was my booked appointments yesterday. Today I had a call with another big tech company. And then I went to Rhinos to get some cards graded from a guy named Ryan, who grades, sports cards. But here's the gist of why. I have great, amazing business partners, but they're booked 8 to 10 hours a day. And they're miserable from it. And they're miserable because all day they work on other people's priorities. And if you go through your calendar, I would tell you that 80% of all your appointments are other people's priorities, not yours. And when your calendar is full, how could you work on what's most important to you in your world? Every night I ask myself a very simple question. It's been a life-changing process experience for me, Dan, that I've done every night for 10 plus years. I start with one simple question. What would winning look like tomorrow? If I only accomplished one thing tomorrow, what would it be? And then I write it down. The next step is I make a list of my priorities for the next day. And priorities don't come out of your head organized sequentially. Unless you're a super genius, mine aren't. It comes out, I write it down. I'm like, do this, call this person, negotiate this, make an offer on that, try to recruit. I walk through my list and I come up with 5 to 7 things every single day. Then I immediately go back to that list on a Sharpie piece of paper like that. And I put a 1 next to the most important thing. Then I put a 2, a 3, a 4, or a 5. So now I've done 2 things so far. 1, I've asked what winning looks like tomorrow. 2, I put a list of my priorities and I've organized them. And if I only got one thing done, what would it be? And if I got the second thing done, what would I do for the third thing? The third thing I do is I look at my calendar and I cancel everything that I can. Here's an example of how I do that. My assistant, Aaron, will call somebody and say, hey, unfortunately, something's came up with Ben. He's truly sorry. He's really excited to meet with you. Would you mind reaching out next week to reschedule a time with Ben? 80% of the time, Dan, they never reach out again. Now, you would have rescheduled in the moment, or my friends would have rescheduled in the moment, so you immediately add something back on your calendar. I want people to fight to get on my calendar. When somebody has an in-person with me, we'll reach out and say, hey, would you be happy to do a Zoom? Unfortunately, with travel, it's going to be easier. If somebody has a Zoom with me, I say, hey, would it be okay if we do a phone call? I'm not going to be in front of my computer. And if I have a phone call with somebody, I'll text them and say, hey, remind me what our agenda is, and I'll try to solve it by text. I take everything and I cut it in half by moving down that path. So the step 3 is I free up my calendar. Step 4, I call it my rituals. My rituals are, what am I going to eat? What am I going to drink? What am I going to read? What am I going to do for exercise tomorrow? Because that's what gives you energy. A really good professional can go for 90 minutes to 2 hours without a break and stay at peak performance. But anybody that works 4 hours straight through Zooms or whatever that might be, or phone calls or whatever, is not at their peak performance. You need 10 to 15 to 20 minute breaks between those sessions. That's how you stay at peak performance. So I plan out what that's going to be, and I make sure that there's protein shakes and snacks and water and all that kind of stuff around me. And I have that plan of what I'm going to read, listen to, that kind of stuff. The fourth thing I do is I make sure that I have time and I schedule those things on my calendar for my priorities. So you can't really say my priority tomorrow is 1, 2, and 3, and then look at your calendar, I have no time to do it. At the end of the day, my goal is to increase my hourly rate. And the only way you increase your hourly rate is you work on things that pay an enormous amount of money per hour. But if you went through your calendar for the last week, everybody listening to the podcast, just go through your calendar and put a number of what you think you made per hour in that appointment. Is it 0? Is it negative 1,000? Is it plus $100? Is it plus 10,000? Is it plus $1 million? Go through every appointment, rank them. And then you'll easily be able to see what your income is going to be next year. Your income next year is determined by how you spend your time this year, right? And then the last step of my process is I simply make a commitment that I'm going to follow that plan for one day tomorrow. I wake up the next morning, I review my priorities, I review what winning looks like, I review my calendar, and then I go off and I do it. Now, I don't have a fully booked calendar, but Dan will tell you, I put in my hours. I'm here at the office from 8 to 6 or 9 to 6 every single day. I work hard. I just get to decide what I work on based on what my priorities are, as opposed to having a calendar that's so full that I can't work on that. It's been life-changing for me.
So good, man. And honestly, like just that on its own, if I was to, and there's 1,000 things we can all learn from you, but that, your ability, I mean, we sat at a dinner, and your ability to, like my calendar, literally, I cut out, I would estimate, and I can still do better, but I might not have done as well as you wanted me to do, but I probably cut 3 hours a week off my calendar. 3 hours a week times 52, that's a lot of hours, and I'm going to continue to, right? And so this is one I'll be rewinding, listening back on as well, making sure that I'm hitting on each of these. I'm going to throw the last question out in the garbage bin, and instead, like you've mentioned playing cards twice now. So, people want to just know, like, who's Ben Kinney? What are you up to? What do you do? What do you like? Playing baseball cards, sports cards, they're a part of your life. And I'm starting to notice that a lot of entrepreneurs and people, business guys that I really respect, I've started to find this pattern of sports cards being a part of the lives of these grown men. And what is it about them? What do you enjoy about them? What cards are hot? What are you thinking about? Like let's go to that world for a moment.
Yeah, it's funny. Part of it, I think it's growing up poor, not being able to buy the things that you wanted to buy. Also, there's a little bit of dopamine that happens in the brain when you purchase something. And for years, you'll go off and you purchase something or do something, gambling or food or whatever that stuff is, and then you never really use it and it goes away. But when you become a collector, you purchase things that go up in value over time. So I try to justify it as putting things in an investment bucket. I heavily invest in real estate. I heavily invest in the stock market. I invest by buying or building businesses. I have an enormous amount of cash allocated for protection. But the fifth bucket for wealth for me is collectibles. It's assets. It's art. It's classic cars. It's sports cards. I'm just fascinated by it. It's something fun for me to do. But if I was giving investment advice for sports cards, I think the WNBA is going to take off. I think the WNBA with players like Caitlin Clark and
You said W, didn't you? You said W.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Just want to make sure we heard that right.
There's 13 teams in the WNBA right now. They have a 14th launching, which is the Golden State Valkyries out of San Francisco. And I believe the next two expansion teams are Portland and Toronto. And you're seeing these teams taking off. And I think the sports cards of the very talented women of today are going to be worth a lot of money going forward. So that is my bet. WNBA cards.
That's your buy low.
That's my thought.
Advice right there.
Yeah.
What's going on in that world right now? Because I mean, the WNBA has been around for 20 years at least.
Yeah, for sure.
What's happening now? What's changing things? I mean, there's Caitlin Clark. Even a guy like me knows her.
Mm-hmm. I think that NBA teams, NBA team owners are starting to invest in it, and they're putting money into it, and they're making the brand, more apparent. I saw this WNBA player come speak in Vegas at an event, and she told a story. She said, I went to an elementary school to speak, and I looked out in the audience, and of course there were all these little girls wearing Las Vegas Aces shirts. She said, but there was an equal amount of boys there wearing Las Vegas Aces shirts. And it's becoming just an amazing sport to watch. Like you see like Caitlin and Angel and Brink and like all these players, how amazing they are. Like they crush it. Like it's really, really fun to watch them play.
Well, I think you might be right. There's a good chance you're right, because firsthand story, I was standing in a sports card store very recently, and a little boy walked in. He must have been 12 years old, maybe. And what came out of his mouth, I couldn't believe. He looked over to the people working there and he said, "Do you guys have the blah, 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 WNBA something cards?" I was like, "What?" So I think you could be onto something, man. You're awesome, dude. Thank you for joining us here. Tons of nuggets, and just always, you're just a great champion of the entire real estate world, its professionals, the industry. And I'm just really impressed with what you're building, what you've accomplished so far, and also the bigger vision of where you're headed. So I'm rooting for you in a huge way. Anything I can do to ever help you, you just let me know, please. And this is Ben Kinney on Masters of Business.